Poor girl covers. A stranger's bus fare, not knowing he was a millionaire who'd shock everyone. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. Rain poured steadily over the Chicago bus station, turning the cracked concrete into shining silver streaks. The cold cut through every layer of clothing, the kind of chill that made strangers keep their heads down and hurry past one another. Emily Carter tightened her thin jacket around her shoulders, shivering as wind whipped through the open platform. She had not eaten since breakfast, and her stomach twisted painfully. But the last few dollars in her wallet were meant for the bus ride home. Nothing more, nothing less. She stood under the flickering light of the ticket machine, digging into her worn bag, praying she had enough for a one-way fare. Behind her, footsteps stumbled. A man, soaked from head to toe, leaned against the pillar near the bench. His hair dripped like he had walked through a storm. His hands trembled as he tried to warm them with his breath. His voice was thin, almost cracking. "Miss, I am sorry. I lost my wallet. I need to get home, but I do not have enough for the bus ticket." His eyes lifted to hers, tired but sincere. Emily froze. She only had enough for herself. Her apartment heating had been off for 2 weeks. Her landlord was threatening eviction. Her mother needed medicine they still had not been able to afford. She had already missed one shift at the diner because her last bus broke down. She had no backup plan, no savings, no one to call. But she also knew what it felt like to be stranded in the cold, with nowhere to go and no one to help. She pulled her wallet out slowly, feeling the thinness of it, the emptiness of it. A single $10 bill remained. Her dinner money, her last cushion, her tiny piece of survival. She stared at it. Her throat tightened. Then she exhaled. "Here," she said softly, pressing the bill into his shaking hand. "Get home safe." The man blinked, startled, as if he had never expected anyone to choose kindness over survival. His voice caught, hoarse from the cold. "You are giving me this? You do not even know me." Emily shrugged with a tired smile. "I will manage somehow." For a moment, he just held the bill, looking at her like he was memorizing the moment. His expression shifted, almost aching. "I promise I will pay you back," he said quietly. Emily nodded, not thinking twice. People always promised things in the middle of hardship. She did not expect to see him again. But something in the way he looked at her lingered, a strange intensity, like gratitude wrapped in disbelief. Before she could ask if he was all right, her bus pulled up with a rattling stop. She stepped aboard, glancing back through the streaking glass. The man was still standing there, gripping the bill tightly, watching her leave. As the bus rolled away, Emily leaned her forehead against the cold window. The city blurred past her like smeared watercolor. She was exhausted, hungry, and one wrong turn away from losing everything. Yet somehow, handing over that last $10 made her chest feel a little warmer. "Kindness does not go unpaid," she whispered to herself, though even she did not fully believe it. What she did not know was that the stranger she helped was not stranded, not broke, and definitely not ordinary. He was a millionaire, and her small act of kindness had just set in motion a chain of events that would turn her entire world upside down. The next few days blurred together for Emily in a haze of fatigue, hunger, and quiet panic. Chicago's cold November wind pushed against her thin jacket as she hurried from one place to another, trying to keep her life from unraveling. But it felt like everything was slipping through her fingers faster than she could catch it. The morning after she gave the stranger her last $10, Emily rushed to the bus stop for a job interview she had hoped would change everything. Her shoes were still damp from the night before, and each step squished uncomfortably. She kept glancing at the time on her cracked phone screen. The bus finally arrived, sputtering and groaning as it pulled in, but halfway across town it jerked violently and rolled to a stop. The engine coughed, wheezed, and died. Passengers groaned in frustration. Emily felt her heart drop. She waited, then waited longer. The minutes turned into an hour, and the hour turned into a missed interview. She stood on the sidewalk as the bus driver apologized. But apologies did not pay rent. Apologies did not put food on the table. And apologies definitely did not fix the mounting medical bills waiting for her mother. By the time she arrived at the restaurant where she worked part-time, the manager was already pacing at the entrance with his arms folded. "You are late again, Emily. This is the third time this month," he said with a hard sigh. "I am so sorry," she pleaded. The bus broke down, and he held up a hand. "I cannot keep giving chances. We are short-staffed during the holidays. I need reliable people." Her stomach twisted. "Please, I really need this job." He looked at her with a mixture of pity and exhaustion. "I know, but I have to let you go." The words hit like a physical blow. Emily nodded slowly, unable to meet his eyes. She walked out with her apron folded tightly in her hands, swallowing the lump in her throat until it hurt. That afternoon, she found a notice taped to her apartment door. The landlord's handwriting was hard and sharp. "Final warning. Payment overdue. Eviction scheduled if rent is not paid by Friday." She closed her eyes, leaning her forehead against the peeling door frame. She had no money left, no job, no leads, only a sick mother who needed medication she could barely afford, and a tiny room that was slipping out of her reach. Still, she refused to break. That night she headed to the university library, the only warm place open late enough for her to rest without being questioned. The security guard recognized her by now and gave her a sympathetic nod as she walked in. She curled into one of the corner chairs, hugging her backpack for warmth. Her stomach growled again, but she pretended not to hear it. She opened her sketchbook, flipping through pages filled with drawings of street corners, passing faces, and quiet moments she wished she could live in. Art was the one thing she had left, the one way she could still breathe. But even her pencils were getting too small to hold properly. A soft cough broke the silence. An elderly volunteer from the soup kitchen, Miss Ruth, walked by with an armful of returned books. She glanced down at Emily's tired face and paused. "You are here again tonight?" Miss Ruth asked gently. Emily forced a smile. "Just until I figure things out." The woman's eyes softened with understanding. "Hard times do not last. Kind hearts do." Emily's throat tightened at the words. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Hours later, around 2 in the morning, the library lights dimmed to signal closing time. Emily gathered her things and made her way to the bus stop outside. The streets were quiet except for the hum of passing cars. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to fight the night chill. As she waited, she could not stop replaying the moment at the bus station, the stranger's trembling hands, and the way he whispered, "I will pay you back." Most people said things like that and vanished. She did not expect anything different. Kindness was a one-way street more often than not. But something about that night stuck with her. Something in the way he looked at her, almost like he knew her struggle, almost like he cared. She shook the thought away. It did not matter. She needed to focus on tomorrow. Maybe she could help at the soup kitchen for a meal. Maybe the diner down the block was hiring. Maybe she could sell a few sketches. Hope was thin, but it was all she had. As the bus finally arrived and she climbed aboard, she pressed her forehead against the cold window again. Lights slid past, casting flashes of gold on her tired eyes. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "Please, let something change." What she could not know was that her life had already changed the moment she handed that $10 bill to a stranger in the rain. And that same stranger was about to enter her world again, in a way she never expected. The next morning, the city felt even colder. Emily wrapped her jacket tightly around herself as she stepped off the bus near the community soup kitchen. She had volunteered there before whenever she needed a warm meal, and the staff never turned her away. The buildings, old brick walls, and the soft smell of simmering vegetables always made her feel a little less alone. Inside, the kitchen buzzed with quiet activity. Volunteers arranged trays, stirred large pots, and wiped down tables. Emily slipped on an apron and joined the line without needing to be asked. Helping out gave her a reason to stand here, a reason to accept a bowl of soup without feeling like she was taking advantage. It made her feel useful, even with everything falling apart. As she ladled stew into styrofoam bowls, Miss Ruth walked by and gave her a warm squeeze on the shoulder. "Good to see you back, dear," she said. "Hard nights do not last forever." Emily smiled faintly. "Thank you. I am trying my best." She kept her head down, focused on the steady rhythm of serving food. It grounded her. It kept her mind from spiraling into the fear of losing her home and her mother's medication bills waiting at the pharmacy. Then the door opened. Cold air swept into the room, followed by footsteps that echoed across the worn tile floor. Emily looked up instinctively, and the ladle slipped in her hand. The man from the bus station was standing in the entryway. But he was not shivering this time. He was not soaked or trembling. He was wearing a tailored charcoal coat, clean leather gloves, polished shoes, and a scarf that looked far too expensive for anyone who had lost their wallet. He scanned the room, and when his gaze landed on her, something softened in his expression. He walked toward her with calm, intentional steps. Emily's heart pounded. "What is going on? That cannot be him," she whispered under her breath. But it was him. The same eyes, the same voice steady now, no longer thin from cold. "Miss Carter," he said gently. She froze. "You remember my name?" "You told the bus driver when he asked," he said with a faint smile. "I remember everything about that night." Emily felt heat rush to her face. The apron suddenly felt too small, her clothes too worn, her hair too messy. She set the ladle down and wiped her hands on a towel, trying to calm the sudden swirl of confusion and embarrassment. "You look different," she managed to say. "You are not the same as before." "No," he said softly. "I am not." He reached into his coat pocket and handed her a card, a thick, embossed business card. Emily blinked as she read the name. David Carter, Chief Executive Officer, Nova Spark Technologies, and Carter Foundation. She nearly dropped it. "You are a CEO?" she whispered. "I thought you said you lost your wallet." "You looked freezing." "I was undercover for a foundation project," he explained. "I was observing how people respond to strangers in need. Most people ignored me. Some pretended not to hear me. But you gave me your last $10. Emily felt her breath catch. "So, the whole thing was a test? I was part of some experiment?" "No," David said, shaking his head firmly. "Your kindness was real. You acted when no one else did. That was not an experiment. That was you." Emily looked down at the card again. Her hands trembled slightly. She felt embarrassed, confused, and a little betrayed. She had believed he was cold and desperate like her. Now she discovered he had resources, a company, a foundation, and a life miles above hers. Miss Ruth walked by and paused at the tension in the air. She glanced between them knowingly but did not interrupt. David stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I came here to find you, not because of the project. Because I meant what I said. I wanted to pay you back." Emily swallowed hard. "It was just $10. "No," he said softly. "It was dignity. And no one gives that away unless they have a good heart." Emily did not know what to say. She had never felt so seen and so exposed at the same time. As she stared at the business card in her hand, she felt the world shift beneath her feet. This man was not a stranger anymore. He was someone powerful, someone watching her with a sincerity that unsettled her. And for the first time, she wondered if that night at the bus station had changed far more than she realized. Emily stood frozen, the business card still warm in her hand, as David waited patiently, as if he understood her need to process the impossible. The noise of the soup kitchen faded into a dull hum behind her. She felt the weight of 100 questions pressing against her chest, but only one managed to escape her lips. "Why are you here?" she asked quietly. David slipped his gloves off and placed them on the counter beside her, his posture calm and steady. "To thank you," he said, "and to return what I owe." Emily shook her head, overwhelmed. "You do not owe me anything. It was just a bus fare. You do not need to make a big deal out of it." But David did not seem convinced. If anything, her humility made his expression soften even more. "It was not the money," he said. "It was the way you looked at me that night. Like I mattered, like I was not invisible." Emily stared at him, unsure how to react. She remembered that night vividly. Everyone else rushed past him without a second glance, and she had wondered how someone could ignore another human being freezing in the cold. But she had never imagined the man she helped was someone with a penthouse office and a corporation under his name. She stepped back slightly, needing space to breathe. "This feels like too much," she whispered. "You showing up here, telling me all this. I do not even know what to say." "You do not have to say anything right now," David replied gently. "But at least let me return your $10. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a crisp envelope. Emily did not take it. She shook her head again. "That money is gone," she said. "I did not give it to you expecting anything. And that," David said with a quiet intensity, "is exactly why I cannot just walk away." Emily swallowed hard. She felt exposed under his gaze, like he could see every struggle she tried to hide. Her mind raced through everything happening in her life. Losing her job, the eviction notice, her mother's medication, the nights spent in the library. She wondered if he could somehow see all of it in her eyes. Miss Ruth passed behind them and gently nudged Emily with her elbow. "Go on, dear," she whispered. "Talk to him. Men like that do not come around every day, especially not looking that sincere." Emily's cheeks flushed. "Miss Ruth," she muttered, embarrassed. But David just gave the older woman a polite nod, clearly grateful for her attempt to ease the tension. He turned back to Emily. "Do you have a minute? May we talk outside? I do not want to make you uncomfortable in front of everyone." Emily hesitated. The air inside felt tight around her ribs. Maybe fresh air would help her think. She finally nodded. "Just for a minute." They stepped outside into the crisp afternoon breeze. Cars passed by, and the sidewalk glistened from the morning drizzle. Emily crossed her arms to warm herself, and David noticed immediately. Without a word, he removed his coat and offered it to her. Emily pulled back. "No, thank you. I cannot take that." "You are freezing," David said softly. "Please." His voice was warm in a way she had not expected. She reluctantly accepted the coat, surprised at how heavy and warm it felt. Everything about him, the coat, the way he carried himself, the calm confidence reminded her of the distance between their worlds. "What is all of this, David?" she asked finally. "You are a millionaire. You run a foundation. Why would you care about what I did?" He exhaled slowly, looking out at the street. "Because I have met thousands of people in my life. Investors, partners, board members, donors. But very few of them would give their last dollar to a man they thought was broke. That kind of kindness is rare. And it matters to me." Emily looked down at the sidewalk, unsure how to hold something so heavy and unexpected. David continued, "I want to help you, Emily. Not because you gave me money, but because you are someone worth helping." Her throat tightened. She shook her head quickly. "I do not want charity." "This is not charity," he said gently. "It is gratitude. And maybe something more." Emily's breath caught at the last words. She looked up at him, really seeing him for the first time not as the stranger in the rain, not as the millionaire on the card, but as a man who seemed genuinely moved by her. But she still whispered the fear sitting heavy in her heart. "I do not think I belong in your world." David held her gaze steadily, as if he could pull the truth out of her silence. "Maybe," he said softly. "My world is exactly where someone like you is needed." Emily had no answer for that. She only felt the ground shifting beneath her as something unfamiliar and fragile began to take root, something she was afraid to name. And for the first time since everything in her life had started falling apart, she felt the faintest spark of possibility. Emily did not sleep much that night. She kept replaying every word David said outside the soup kitchen, every look in his eyes, every moment that made her feel seen in a way she was not used to. She tried to push the thoughts away, telling herself that people like him lived in a world too bright and polished for someone like her. But the warmth of his coat still lingered on her skin, reminding her that the moment had been real. The next few days were harder than she expected. She spent her mornings checking bulletin boards for job openings and her afternoons helping at the soup kitchen in exchange for a hot meal. She tried to forget the encounter with David, but the business card sat inside her bag like a spark she was afraid to touch. By Thursday evening, exhaustion pressed heavy on her body. She returned to the library, sinking into the same corner chair she had used for nights now. She opened her sketchbook and tried to draw, but the pencil felt lifeless in her hand. Every line wavered. Every page looked tired, just like she felt. The weight of everything hit her at once. The missed interview, losing her job, the eviction notice, her mother's medication waiting in a pharmacy she could not afford, and the sinking feeling that life was closing in on her no matter how hard she tried to stay afloat. Her eyes stung as she stared at the blank page. "I am trying," she whispered to herself. "I really am." Her voice trembled. She pressed her hands to her face, breathing slowly until the wave of panic eased. She did not want to cry here. Not again. When the library loudspeakers announced closing time, Emily packed her things and stepped outside into the chilly night air. The street lamps glowed amber across the sidewalk, casting long shadows behind her. She headed toward the bus stop, her steps slow and heavy. As she approached the shelter, she saw the familiar battered bench where she normally waited. She sighed and sat down, hugging her jacket tight around her. A moment later, she sensed someone sit at the far end of the bench. She glanced to the side and froze. David was sitting there, hands folded, eyes soft but steady, as if he had been waiting for her. Emily's breath caught. What are you doing here?" He offered a small smile. "Looking for you." Her chest tightened. "David, you cannot keep doing this. You do not have to follow me around. My problems are mine." "I know," he said, "and I respect that. But I wanted to check on you." Emily hugged her arms around herself. "I am fine." David tilted his head slightly. "You are sleeping at the library." Her heart thudded painfully. "How did you know?" "I asked Miss Ruth," he said gently. "I wanted to make sure you were safe." Emily turned her face away, ashamed at being seen so clearly. "I did not want anyone to know. I do not want people to feel sorry for me." "Emily," David said softly, "I do not feel sorry for you. I admire you." Her eyes lifted in surprise. He continued, "You are carrying the entire world on your shoulders, and you are still the kind of person who gives your last $10 to a stranger. That is not pity. That is respect." Emily swallowed hard, the words cutting through her defenses. She looked down at her hands, unsure what to say. David reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "Before you say anything," he added quickly, "this is not charity. It is a job application. A real one." "A job?" she echoed. "Yes," he said. "The Carter Foundation has an open position for community outreach assistants. It is part-time to start, but stable, and it pays better than most entry-level jobs. You would be working with people like Miss Ruth, helping run programs you already know well." Emily stared at the envelope, her heart racing. You think I can do something like that?" David nodded without hesitation. "I know you can. You already are. You showed compassion when you had nothing. That is exactly the kind of person we want." Emily felt her throat tighten again, but this time not from despair. She took the envelope with trembling hands. David stood, offering her a gentle smile. "You do not need to decide tonight, but I wanted you to know that you have options, real ones." And that someone believes in you. Emily blinked quickly, trying to hold back the emotion rising in her chest. Thank you, she whispered. As he stepped away from the bench, he turned back one last time. Emily, I meant what I said. Your kindness changed something in me. Do not ever think you are small. She watched him walk into the night, the city lights reflecting softly against his coat. For the first time in a long while, Emily did not feel cold. She felt seen. She felt hopeful. And she felt the faint beginning of a life she never thought she deserved. She held the envelope tightly, knowing this moment mattered. Something was shifting. Something was coming. And she could feel it in her bones. Emily woke up early the next morning with the envelope from David still clutched in her hand. She had fallen asleep that way, curled up under a thin blanket in the corner of the library, too afraid to open it the night before. The memory of David's voice lingered in her mind, steady and warm, telling her she was someone worth believing in. As the library lights brightened for the morning shift, Emily finally gathered the courage to open the envelope. Inside was a printed application form, a list of job responsibilities, and a short handwritten note from David. You are more capable than you realize. Take the first step. David. Her fingers brushed over the words again and again. No one had ever written something like that to her. No one had ever seen her potential, let alone acknowledged it. She folded the paper carefully and placed it back in her bag. Her heart thudded with a mix of hope and fear as she hurried out of the building. She knew she needed to freshen up before going anywhere near the Carter Foundation offices. She stopped at a public restroom nearby, splashed cold water on her face, and tied her hair back as neatly as she could. By the time she reached the foundation building, her hands were trembling. The tall glass doors reflected her worn clothes, her tired eyes, her thin jacket. She almost turned around, but then she remembered David's words. I admire you. She inhaled deeply and pushed the doors open. Inside, the lobby was bright and airy. People moved with purpose, carrying files, answering phones, and greeting each other warmly. Emily felt painfully out of place, but she approached the front desk anyway. Hello, she said softly. My name is Emily Carter. I am here to submit an application. The receptionist looked up and smiled kindly. Of course, right this way. Emily felt her nerves settle a little. The staff did not look at her with judgment or skepticism. They treated her like she belonged here. When she reached the small interview room, a woman with silver glasses and a welcoming smile stepped inside. Emily, I am Clara. I run staffing for community outreach. David told me you might stop by. Emily's breath caught. He mentioned that? Clara nodded warmly. He was very clear that we should meet you as soon as possible. Emily sat nervously as Clara reviewed her application. You have experience in volunteer work, Clara noted. You work well with people. And Miss Ruth gave you an excellent recommendation. That speaks volumes. Emily blinked. Miss Ruth recommended me? Oh, yes, Clara said. She said you are one of the most dedicated volunteers she has ever met. Hearing that made Emily's throat tighten. She had never imagined that the small moments she spent helping at the soup kitchen had mattered to anyone, let alone enough to be mentioned in a job review. Clara leaned forward slightly. Emily, your situation is difficult, but you have something most people do not. Compassion. We build our entire foundation on that. Emily looked down at her hands, tears burning behind her eyelids. I just want to do something that matters. Something that feels real. Clara smiled gently. Then I believe this is the right place for you. They spoke for nearly an hour. By the time the interview ended, Emily felt lighter than she had in months. Clara shook her hand and said they would call her by the end of the week. As Emily walked out of the building, the cold air felt different, sharper, but no longer painful. She headed toward the bus stop, replaying every moment in her mind, her heart full of nervous hope. But when she reached the bus shelter, she realized she was not alone. David was there again, leaning casually against the railing, hands in his coat pockets, as if he had been waiting for her. Emily froze, then laughed softly. How do you always know where to find me? David shrugged with a gentle smile. I told you. I wanted to check on you. How did it go? Emily held up the envelope of paperwork she had received. Better than I expected. I knew it would, he replied. She hesitated before speaking again. David, why are you doing all of this? You barely know me. David grew quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. I know enough, he said finally. I know that you helped a stranger with nothing to gain. I know that you work harder than most people I have met. And I know that you deserve a chance. Maybe more than one. Emily felt her pulse quicken. The honesty in his voice made her chest ache. You make it sound so simple, she whispered. Sometimes, he said softly, it is. For a moment, they simply stood there, the cool breeze brushing past them. Emily looked at him not as a millionaire, not as the man in the rain, but as someone who saw her at her lowest and did not turn away. She spoke quietly. I am not used to people believing in me. David held her gaze, his voice steady. Then let me be the first of many. Emily could not speak. She could only breathe in the moment, letting the unfamiliar feeling of hope settle gently inside her. She did not know what would happen next, but for the first time in a long time, she wanted to find out. The following days moved slowly for Emily, filled with a restless mix of hope and fear. She checked her phone constantly, waiting for a call from the Carter Foundation. Every time the screen lit up, her heart jumped, only to fall again when it was not the number she hoped for. By Wednesday afternoon, she was back at the soup kitchen helping Miss Ruth stack canned goods in the pantry. Her movements were tired, but steady. She needed the distraction. Miss Ruth watched her for a moment before placing a gentle hand on Emily's shoulder. You are waiting for that call, dear, she said softly. Emily nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes. I feel like everything depends on it. It does not, Miss Ruth said. You are more than one phone call. Emily tried to smile, but the fear of disappointment clung to her like a shadow. She wanted to believe Miss Ruth, but her entire life had been a pattern of close chances slipping through her fingers. She could not help but brace herself for the worst. Right before dusk settled over the city, her phone finally buzzed. Emily froze, her breath catching in her chest. The screen displayed a number she recognized. Her hands trembled as she answered. Hello? A warm voice replied. Hello, Emily. This is Clara from the Carter Foundation. Emily's knees felt weak. She leaned against the shelf, desperately steadying herself. I wanted to let you know, Clara continued with a smile in her voice, that we would like to offer you the position. For a moment, Emily could not move. She blinked rapidly, trying to make sure she heard correctly. You want to hire me? Yes, Clara said. You showed great heart and commitment. Our team believes you will be a wonderful addition. Emily pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes stinging with tears. Thank you. Thank you so much. Come in tomorrow morning to complete your paperwork, Clara said. We look forward to having you. When the call ended, Emily stood there in shocked silence. Then the emotion she had held back for weeks finally broke free. She cried into her hands, relief and gratitude flooding through her like warm sunlight. Miss Ruth hurried over. Emily, dear, what is it? Emily lifted her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. I got the job. I really got it. Miss Ruth wrapped her arms around her tightly. I knew you would. Kind hearts always find their way. That night, Emily walked to the bus stop with a lighter step, her breath forming small clouds in the chilly air. She hugged her jacket close, but it was not the cold that made her shiver. It was the overwhelming feeling that her life had finally shifted. As she approached the bus shelter, she saw a familiar silhouette waiting there. David stood with his hands in his coat pockets, watching the street with a thoughtful expression. When he noticed her, his face softened. Emily. She could not hide her smile. I got the job. David exhaled slowly, almost like he had been holding his breath for her. I am so proud of you. His voice was filled with sincerity, and something deeper that made Emily's heart beat faster. She sat beside him on the bench, the cold metal pressing through her jacket, but the moment felt warm. I did not think I would get it, she admitted. I kept thinking they would choose someone else. David shook his head gently. You were never the second choice. You were the right one. Emily looked at him, studying the quiet confidence in his expression. You believed in me before I believed in myself. David turned toward her, his voice low. Emily, sometimes life pushes the strongest people, the hardest, but you never stop trying. That is what I saw in you from the beginning. She felt her pulse race at the warmth in his words. I still do not understand why you care this much. David hesitated for a moment, then spoke with a softness that carried weight. Because you changed something in me that night. You reminded me what genuine kindness looks like. And because I want to be part of your life, if you will let me. Emily's breath caught. The honesty in his words struck something deep inside her, something she had tried to ignore. Before she could respond, the bus arrived, brakes hissing as it pulled up. Emily stood, her heart pounding. Can we talk again tomorrow? She asked quietly. David smiled, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. I would like that very much. As she stepped onto the bus, she glanced back through the window. David was still standing there, hands in his pockets, watching her leave with an expression she had never seen directed at her before. It was hope, it was admiration, and maybe, just maybe, something more. The next morning, Emily stepped off the bus, with a rush of nerves and excitement swirling inside her. The Carter Foundation building rose ahead of her, tall and bright against the pale winter sky. She clutched her bag tightly, her breath forming small clouds as she walked toward the doors. This time, she did not feel like an intruder. She felt like someone who belonged here. Inside, Clara greeted her warmly and guided her through the paperwork. Emily signed forms, received her identification badge, and met several staff members who welcomed her with genuine smiles. Every moment felt surreal, like stepping into a life she had only imagined from a distance. By noon, Clara handed her a folder with her schedule. You will be helping us with community outreach, she said. We think you will bring a lot of heart to the team. Emily nodded, overwhelmed with gratitude. Thank you. I will work hard. I promise. When she stepped outside for a break, the cold air hit her cheeks, but she barely felt it. She sat on a bench near the building entrance, letting everything sink in. For the first time in months, she felt steady, safe, hopeful. Then she heard footsteps. Emily turned just as David approached, his coat billowing slightly in the winter breeze. He looked tired, almost as if he had been running between meetings, but when he saw her, his entire expression softened. Well, he said with a warm smile, how does it feel to be officially part of the foundation? Emily laughed softly. It feels unreal. I keep thinking I will wake up back in the library. You will not, David said. You earned this. She looked down at her badge, her fingers brushing the plastic. I would not be here without you. David shook his head. You would have found your way. I only opened the door. You walked through it. Emily felt a warmth rise in her chest. She met his eyes, and for a moment, the world felt quiet. But the peace was interrupted when a group of Foundation employees stepped outside, whispering among themselves. One of them spoke louder than intended. Is that her? The girl from the bus station? I heard she paid for the CEO by mistake. Another laughed. Lucky break. Some people just stumble into good fortune. The words hit Emily like a splash of cold water. She lowered her gaze, embarrassment prickling her skin. David turned sharply toward them, his voice firm and clear. That is enough. The employees froze. David stepped closer, his tone calm but unmistakably authoritative. Emily did not stumble into anything. She gave her last $10 to a man she believed was homeless. She showed more integrity in one moment than most people show in a lifetime. The employees exchanged nervous glances and quickly retreated back inside. Emily stared at David, stunned. You did not have to do that. Yes, I did, David said gently. No one has the right to diminish your kindness. Her eyes warmed with emotion. "Thank you." He sat beside her, the quiet of the moment wrapping around them again. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small. It was the $10 bill she had given him, but it was different now. The worn paper was placed inside a clear, protective sleeve, sealed carefully, as if it were something precious. Emily touched it gently. "You kept it?" David nodded. "It reminded me of who I want to be." Emily's throat tightened. He held the sleeve out to her. "It belongs to you," he said softly. "It always did." She shook her head, wiping her eyes. "No, David, it belongs to us." To what that moment meant. David's breath caught slightly, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The city moved around them, but the space between them felt still. He finally said, "Emily, I want to stay in your life, not because of gratitude, not because of the foundation, but because I care about you." Emily looked at him slowly, her heart steady and full. "I care about you too." David reached out, taking her hand gently, as if asking permission with the gesture alone. She let her fingers intertwine with his, feeling the warmth of his touch. For the first time in her life, the future did not look frightening. It looked possible, bright, shared. Emily breathed in the cold winter air and smiled. Her life had changed the moment she handed a stranger $10 on a rainy night. And now, sitting beside him, hand in hand, she knew something else with absolute certainty. This was only the beginning. Winter eased into the first soft hints of spring by the time Emily settled into her new routine at the Carter Foundation. She arrived early every morning, greeting volunteers, organizing outreach events, and visiting the soup kitchen where she had once stood in line for meals. But now she returned with purpose, helping others the way she had once needed help herself. Every day felt like a quiet miracle, a life rebuilt, not by luck, but by the small acts of courage she had forced herself to take. And through it all, David stayed close, not in a way that overwhelmed her, but in a steady, grounding presence. He checked in on her progress, invited her to sit with him at lunch when their schedules allowed, and walked her to the bus stop on evenings when work ran late. Their connection deepened naturally, as if it had been waiting for them all along. But something had been growing in Emily, too. A confidence, a sense of belonging, a belief that she deserved more than survival. One crisp afternoon, after helping coordinate a food drive, Emily stepped outside to catch her breath. She leaned against the foundation's stone railing, looking out at the busy street below. Her coat rustled softly in the breeze. She did not hear David approach until he spoke her name. "Emily." She turned, and the warmth in his eyes made her chest tighten. He was holding something small in his hands, a thin black frame. Her heartbeat quickened. "I wanted to show you something," David said softly. He handed her the frame. Inside, protected behind the glass, was the $10 bill she had given him that rainy night. The same wrinkled edges, the same faded ink, but the caption beneath it made her breath catch. The moment everything changed. Emily traced the glass with her fingertips. "You framed it." David nodded. "It is the most valuable thing I own." Her eyes filled with emotion. "David, I am not the girl who gave you her last $10 anymore." "I know," he said gently, stepping closer. "You are stronger, you are braver, and you are still the person who chose kindness when you had nothing left to give." She swallowed hard. "I have changed." "So have I," he whispered. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The hum of the city faded, the breeze stilled. Then David reached for her hand the same gentle, careful way he always did, and intertwined his fingers with hers. "Emily," he said, steady and certain, "I want to be part of your life, not just as someone you helped, not just as someone who helped you back, but as the man who wants to walk beside you. For as long as you will have me." Her breath trembled. Warmth bloomed in her chest, spreading through every part of her. "I want that too," she said. Relief washed across David's face, deep and genuine. He lifted her hand and pressed it gently against his heart. "You have changed who I am," he said quietly. "And I want to spend my life being worthy of you." Emily stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "You already are." The wind picked up then, lightly tugging at her hair. David leaned his forehead against hers, a soft moment of connection that felt like the beginning of something real, something lasting. When he finally spoke, his voice was warm and certain. "Let us build a life together, not built on status or money, but on what started everything: your kindness." Emily smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "That is all I ever wanted." Together, hand in hand, they walked back toward the foundation doors. The city buzzed around them, unaware of the quiet miracle unfolding between two people who should never have crossed paths. But they had, because of $10, because of one moment of compassion, because love often begins where kindness lives. And Emily knew, as she leaned into David's side with a hopeful heart, that her story, their story, was only just beginning.